All right, crank up the volume, everyone, because today we are diving headfirst into metal Hellsinger.
Ooh, spicy.
You bet it is. I got your notes and that YouTube review by Reachpool, and we're going to break down why this game, which I have to say the premise is really unique. It's a blend of Doom-style shooting with rhythm game mechanics. I mean, how often do you see that?
Yeah, I mean, it's like two completely different genres you wouldn't expect them to mesh. And it's getting so much buzz, like everyone's talking about it.
Yeah. Are you ready to shred some demons to heavy metal?
Let's do it.
All right.
What really got me about metal Hellsinger is how it takes those two genres, shooting and rhythm, and turns it into something that you just have to play. Like how many games out there actually let you blast demons to a beat?
Exactly.
And it's not just shooting. You have to reload and dash everything on the beat.
It's wild, right?
It is.
So there are 6 weapons in the game, and they range from like swords and flaming skulls to like the more typical dual pistols and a shotgun. And then there are these weird ranged weapons that kind of reminded me of like the Blades of Chaos from God of War.
Yeah, so those.
But to really get the most out of those weapons and do the most damage, you really have to nail those beats. Now, my question to you is, how challenging is that going to be for someone who maybe isn't like a hardcore rhythm game fan?
Well, even Reachpool, who I think we can agree is pretty good at games,
Yeah.
they admitted that it took them about 20 minutes to kind of get into the groove of things.
Oh, wow.
Their advice, though, was if you start missing beats, just stop, take a breath, refocus, and jump back in.
That's good advice, because, sometimes I get a little button mashy, especially when things get tough.
Oh, yeah.
Did Reachpool mention anything about the difficulty levels in the game?
They did. And actually, they recommend starting on normal. They said easy might be a little too easy.
Huh.
So if you're looking for a challenge, bump it up to normal.
Okay.
Yeah.
I like that. I like a good challenge.
Now imagine someone flawlessly chaining combos
Yeah.
on the hardest difficulty, with that 16x damage multiplier.
Oh, yeah.
It would be insane.
Talk about a spectacle.
Totally.
I'm getting chills just thinking about pulling that off.
Right.
And from your notes, I know that the game actually ranks players based on their performance. So it adds this whole other element to the game. Like, you're not just playing to beat it, you're playing to get the highest score. And that seems really smart, especially for a game that, like we've been saying, takes a lot of practice to master.
Yeah, it adds that extra layer of depth, right? It makes you want to go back and keep trying to improve.
Oh, sure, for sure.
So, we've been talking about how awesome the gameplay is, but Reachpool brought up an interesting point about the visuals. They said, while the levels themselves are really cool, they draw inspiration from ancient cultures like Egyptian and Mayan civilizations.
Right.
They thought the boss designs were a little repetitive.
So you're telling me we've got these amazingly detailed levels, and then the big bad bosses at the end, they all look kind of the same?
Yeah. It seems like a missed opportunity visually.
Totally.
Makes you wonder if maybe there were some constraints during development. Maybe they had to choose between visual variety and staying within budget or meeting deadlines.
No, that's a good point.
Or maybe it was a deliberate artistic choice.
Okay.
Maybe they were trying to emphasize something else in the game.
It's hard to know for sure without getting inside the developers' heads.
Exactly.
But one thing we do know for sure is that music is a huge part of this game. I mean, the title itself, Metal, Hellsinger, kind of gives it away.
Right.
So what jumped out at you from Reachpool's review about the music?
Well, they call the soundtrack brutal and heavy, which makes sense given the name. It sounds like the kind of music that'll get your heart racing,
Are you sure?
But what I found really interesting was how they use the vocals. You only hear them when you're at peak performance, like when you hit that max damage multiplier or during the boss fights.
Oh, I love that. That's like the ultimate reward for staying on beat. It's like the game is saying, hey, you're killing it. Here's the full force of the music.
Exactly.
But it also makes me wonder, is there a risk of sensory overload?
Yeah.
Reachpool did mention experiencing some motion sickness.
They did.
Yeah.
They attributed it to maybe having to manage so many things at once.
Yeah.
The action, the aiming, the reloading, and of course staying on beat.
Right. That's a lot to handle.
It really is.
It makes you think about how developers can create these really intense and immersive experiences, but also make sure that they're comfortable for players.
It's a tough balance to strike.
It really is. Now, Reachpool also talked about the challenges of streaming this game. They said that the fast-paced action might be hard for viewers to follow, especially with that added layer of rhythm.
Yeah, I can see that.
It definitely highlights how different games can be to stream,
Yeah.
Some games just lend themselves naturally to that format, while others might require streamers to kind of change their approach.
Yep.
So it sounds like Metal Hellsinger is shaping up to be this really unique and potentially challenging game. It's a blend of rhythm and action in this super fresh and brutal way.
It really is a testament to how developers can push boundaries,
Mm-hmm.
and create something completely unexpected.
Absolutely.
But the big question is, can a game like this capture a wider audience?
That's the million-dollar question right there.
It is.
And to get to the bottom of that, we need to delve a bit deeper. So stay tuned, because coming up next, we're going to explore what Reachpool had to say about the story and the world building in Metal Hellsinger.
All right, so welcome back to our deep dive into Metal Hellsinger. We've covered the unique gameplay, the visuals. Now let's get into something that I think can make or break a game, the story. What did Reachpool have to say about the narrative in Metal Hellsinger?
Well, they described it as kind of a mystery. They mentioned that the game is relatively short, clocking in at around 5 to 6 hours. But they hinted that there's like a deeper narrative there.
Okay.
At one point, they even used the word romantic to describe it. Romantic. In a game about slaying demons to heavy metal, I gotta know more. What do you think they meant by that?
It's hard to say for sure without more context,
Right.
But maybe there's like an unexpected emotional depth to the story.
Okay.
Perhaps it's tied to the main character's journey, or maybe there's a subplot that runs parallel to all the demon-slaying action.
Right.
It's a clever way to keep players engaged and wanting to uncover those hidden layers.
And to keep them guessing.
Exactly.
It makes you wonder if the developers intentionally kept the story details under wraps to avoid spoilers. Speaking of uncovering things, Reachpool also mentioned unlockable weapon cosmetics. Do you think that kind of thing adds much to a game like this?
I think it depends on the player. For some people, it's a fun way to personalize their experience.
Mm-hmm.
It adds a little visual flair to their weapons.
Right.
But for others, it might just be a minor distraction.
Yeah.
I think what's important is how those cosmetics are integrated into the game. In this case, Reachpool mentioned finding tokens hidden throughout the levels to unlock them, which encourages exploration and rewards players for taking the time to really discover all the hidden elements.
So it's like a little bonus for the completionists out there.
Yeah, exactly.
And it gives the world a little more depth, right?
Right.
Like, it's not just about the combat. It's about taking in the environment and discovering all the secrets.
Right.
Okay, so let's circle back to the music for a second. Reachpool used terms like brutal and heavy to describe the soundtrack. Can we get a little more specific? What kind of metal are we talking about here?
They didn't mention specific bands or subgenres, but based on their descriptions and how they talked about the music, bringing back memories of their metalhead days, it's safe to say it's probably a more aggressive style.
Okay.
But what's interesting is that regardless of the specific subgenre, the game seems to be using metal as more than just background music.
Right.
It's almost like another character in the story,
Yeah.
It evolves and intensifies right alongside the player's actions.
It's like the music is reacting to how well you're doing. Like when you hit that max damage multiplier and the vocals kick in, it's such a rush.
Totally.
I'm curious from like a psychological standpoint, what do you think the impact is of having this kind of music so deeply integrated into the gameplay?
Well, it's fascinating because heavy metal is often associated with powerful emotions, like energy aggression, even catharsis.
Mm-hmm.
By tying the music so closely to the player's performance metal, Hellsinger creates this feedback loop.
I see.
The better you play, the more intense the music becomes,
Mm-hmm.
which in turn fuels your performance even more.
It's like a symbiotic relationship between the player and the music.
Right.
And it makes the whole experience that much more immersive.
Exactly.
Like the music is giving you a shot of adrenaline right when you need it most. Now, we've talked about the levels being inspired by ancient cultures, but what about the enemies? Did Reachpool say anything about their designs?
They didn't go into a ton of detail,
Mm-hmm.
but they did mention that each enemy has its own unique attack patterns and varying damage outputs. So it sounds like there's an element of strategy to the combat.
Interesting.
You can't just run in guns blazing.
Yeah.
You have to analyze the situation, adapt, and choose the right weapon.
Right.
It's
Well,
more tactical than you might think.
it's funny because at first glance, you might assume that it's just a pure action game, but it sounds like there's a lot more depth to the combat than meets the eye.
Absolutely.
You need to think about each enemy's strengths and weaknesses,
Right.
the rhythm of your attacks, and how to maximize your damage output.
Yeah, you're juggling a lot,
Right.
especially when you factor in the whole staying on beat thing.
So not only are you battling demons, you're battling your own instincts to just go all out and break the rhythm.
Exactly.
I'm starting to get a sense of just how demanding this game could be. But we can't ignore the elephant in the room, those repetitive boss designs.
Right.
It's such a contrast to the rest of the game's visual flair.
It is a bit of a head scratcher.
Yeah.
While there might be legitimate reasons behind that design choice,
Yeah.
it does feel like a missed opportunity. Imagine those boss battles with unique visuals, maybe incorporating elements from the levels or tying into the lore in some way.
Right.
It could have elevated those encounters to a whole new level.
It's like they built up all this momentum with the music, the gameplay, the world building, and then the boss designs just fall a little flat.
It's true.
But hey, maybe there's more to it than meets the eye. Perhaps there's a deeper meaning behind those repetitive visuals that we're just not grasping yet.
That's a great point. You
Yeah.
know, sometimes what seems like a flaw can actually be a clever design choice, waiting to be understood in the context of the whole game.
Hmm.
Maybe it's all part of a larger narrative theme, or even a commentary on the nature of repetition itself.
Now you've got me thinking, is it possible that those repetitive bosses are meant to represent some kind of cycle? Or maybe even a reflection of the main character's own internal struggle? This is why I love these deep dives. They always uncover new layers of meaning and interpretation.
Exactly. It's the beauty
Yeah.
of art, right? It invites multiple perspectives and interpretations.
And Metal, Hellsinger, despite its seemingly straightforward premise,
Right.
seems to be packed with those layers, just waiting to be explored.
Definitely. But we'll have to wait for part 3 to really unpack those deeper meanings.
All right, so we're back for the final part of our deep dive into Metal, Hellsinger. We've talked about the good, the brutal, and now it's time to address the, well, less harmonious aspects of the game. You know those repetitive boss designs that Reachpool mentioned? It's been bugging me. This game seems to have so much going for it, and yet this one design choice keeps coming up.
Yeah, it's a valid point. Visually, it does seem like a step back from the creativity we see in the levels and the overall aesthetic.
Right. Was it purely a budgetary or time constraint, or was there like a deeper artistic intention there?
It's hard to say for sure without knowing the developer's thought process,
Right.
but we can speculate.
Okay.
Perhaps they wanted to create a sense of familiarity or maybe even boredom with those bosses.
Okay.
After all, we are talking about hell here,
Right.
a place that's often associated with repetition and torment.
Whoa, I hadn't thought of it that way. So instead of being a visual weakness, it could actually be a subtle way to reinforce the game's themes.
Exactly.
That's a really interesting interpretation.
Or maybe they wanted to challenge players to find enjoyment in the mechanics of those boss battles
Yeah.
rather than relying on visual spectacle.
Yeah.
After all, the gameplay loop, staying on beat, maximizing damage, it remains engaging regardless of what the enemy looks like.
That's true. It could be a way of saying, hey, the real challenge here is mastering the rhythm, not just defeating a visually impressive enemy.
Right.
It makes you think about how we perceive value in games. Do we prioritize aesthetics over mechanics, or vice versa?
It's a good question. And Metal, Hellsinger, seems to be intentionally playing with those expectations.
Right.
It gives you those stunning visuals in the levels, then strips them back for the boss encounters. It forces you to focus on the core gameplay loop.
Yeah.
It's a bold choice, and it might not work for everyone, but it definitely sparks a conversation.
It does. Reachpool also brought up an interesting point about how this game might resonate differently with various generations of metalheads. They even said if they had played it back in their younger days, they might have been obsessed.
Yeah.
It made me think about how our tastes change over time, Do you think this game has the potential to bridge those generational gaps and appeal to both old school and newer metal fans?
I think it absolutely does. The core elements are timeless.
Yeah.
Heavy metal, intense action, a dark and stylish world.
For sure.
And while younger players might be drawn to the fast-paced gameplay and the modern visuals, older metalheads might appreciate the nostalgia factor, the way the music is integrated, even those nods to classic game design.
I think that's a key takeaway from this deep dive. Metal, Hellsinger, is a game that, despite its flaws, offers a truly unique experience. It transcends specific genres or demographics. It takes risks, challenges conventions, and ultimately delivers a really memorable and engaging experience. What stands out to you as the most compelling aspect of the game?
For me, it's the way it uses music is more than just an accompaniment. It's woven into the very fabric of the game, affecting everything from the gameplay mechanics to the overall mood and atmosphere.
Yeah.
It's a testament to the power of music to enhance not just our entertainment experiences,
Yeah.
but our lives in general.
Well said. And for our listeners, we leave you with this final thought. Metal, Hellsinger, is a game that asks you to not just play, but to feel. to tap into the energy of the music, the thrill of the combat, and the mystery of the story. It's a game that, despite its imperfections, dares to be different, and that's something to celebrate. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into Metal Hellsinger.